My name is Bryce, and at 27, I never imagined my own sister Heather would label me a monster. The lies she told destroyed my relationship with our parents, culminating in them refusing to let me through the door when I drove 6 hours to surprise Mom on her 60th birthday. After 18 months of painful separation, they want to reconnect, having finally discovered the truth. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any knife, but healing is possible, even from the worst wounds. If you've ever felt the sting of family betrayal but still hope for healing, tap that like button while I share how my world crumbled and slowly rebuilt itself. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and subscribe if you want more stories about family, betrayal, and the challenging road to reconciliation. Growing up, our family was tight-knit. My parents, Richard and Elaine, created a warm home where laughter flowed freely and problems were solved together. Heather, for years my senior, was my protector and guide through childhood. We built elaborate blanket forts, created our own backyard Olympics, and defended each other fiercely at school. Those early memories still bring a bittersweet smile to my face. As teenagers, though, something shifted. Heather became increasingly distant as she developed her own social circle. While I focused on computers and coding, she gravitated toward theater and art. Our diverging interests weren't concerning initially. It seemed like normal adolescent development. But looking back, I can pinpoint subtle signs of resentment brewing beneath the surface. Occasional barbed comments about me being the golden child, when our parents praised my academic achievements. Small eye rolls when Mom would ask me to help with her computer. Tiny moments that, at the time, seemed insignificant. After college, I landed a promising position at a tech startup in Seattle, 6 hours from our hometown of Portland. The distance didn't damage our family relationships initially. I'd visit monthly, call weekly, and maintained what I thought was a solid connection with everyone, including Heather, who had married Maxwell and settled into a spacious suburban home near our parents. Then came the economic downturn of 2023. Our startup lost major funding, and suddenly I was jobless with an expensive apartment lease. When Heather offered their guest room, for a few months until you get back on your feet, it seemed like a blessing. Mom and Dad were relieved, praising Heather's generosity. "See how your sister looks out for you," Mom said, squeezing my hand. "Family always comes through." The first 2 weeks at Heather and Maxwell's house were pleasant enough. I kept to myself, applied for jobs relentlessly, and contributed to household expenses from my savings. Maxwell, a quiet accountant who worked from home 3 days a week, was cordial if somewhat reserved. We occasionally discussed technology or shared a beer while watching basketball games. Heather maintained her high-energy social calendar, working as an event planner and often arriving home late. By week 3, subtle tensions emerged. Heather began commenting on my job search strategy. "You're being too picky," she'd say over breakfast, scrolling through her phone. "Beggars can't be choosers, Bryce." When I explained I was targeting positions that matched my specialized skills, she'd sigh dramatically. "Must be nice to have options." The passive-aggressive comments multiplied. She'd remark on how long my showers were, how much food I consumed, or how I loaded the dishwasher incorrectly. Maxwell would look uncomfortable during these exchanges but never contradicted his wife. Once, I caught his apologetic glance after Heather criticized my clutter in the guest room, though my belongings were neatly contained in a corner. One evening, while preparing dinner in the kitchen, I overheard them arguing in their bedroom. The walls in their house weren't particularly soundproof, and Heather's voice carried clearly. "I didn't realize he'd still be here after 6 weeks," she hissed. "Mom and Dad always think he's so perfect, and now I'm stuck playing hotel manager." "He's looking for work every day," Maxwell replied, his voice measured. "And he's contributing financially." "It's not about the money," Heather snapped. "It's about having my space invaded. You don't understand because you didn't grow up with Saint Bryce who could do no wrong." I was stunned. I'd always thought our childhood rivalry was normal sibling stuff, not something that festered into adulthood. After that, I became hyper-aware of my presence in their home, striving to be even more unobtrusive. I woke earlier to shower before they needed the bathroom, ate smaller portions at shared meals, and spent weekends at the local library to give them space. Despite my efforts, I noticed Heather's calls with our parents often included subtle digs about my living situation. "Yes, Bryce is still here," she'd say with an exaggerated sigh that made me cringe from across the room. "Oh, he's managing. We're trying to be supportive despite the inconvenience." These conversations always happened within my earshot, almost as if she wanted me to know how she portrayed me to our parents. What troubled me most was how she twisted everyday occurrences when relaying them to Mom and Dad. When I accidentally broke a wine glass while washing dishes and immediately offered to replace it, Heather later told Mom I'd been careless with their things and had a whatever attitude about it. When I missed a spot vacuuming the guest room, it became me not respecting their home. These distortions were subtle enough that confronting her would have seemed petty, yet consistent enough to create a pattern. Maxwell witnessed many of these misrepresentations but maintained an uncomfortable silence. Once, after Heather exaggerated about me leaving lights on all over the house during a call with our parents, he quietly mentioned to me that he'd actually been the one working late in the home office that night. It was the closest he came to acknowledging his wife's behavior. As weeks turned to months, I realized I was walking on eggshells in what was supposed to be a temporary safe haven. The psychological weight of constantly monitoring my actions while searching for employment wore me down, making an already stressful situation nearly unbearable. Yet I remained grateful for the roof over my head and tried to focus on the light at the end of the tunnel. Financial independence and my own space again. After nearly 3 months of tense cohabitation, I finally received a job offer from a promising mid-sized tech firm in Portland. The position offered competitive pay and the stability I desperately needed. When I shared the news over dinner, Maxwell seemed genuinely pleased, offering congratulations and suggesting we celebrate with the good scotch he kept for special occasions. Heather's reaction was more complex. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, finally," she said, twirling pasta around her fork. "I guess persistence pays off eventually. When do you start?" 2 weeks from Monday," I replied, trying to maintain my enthusiasm despite her lukewarm response. "I've already started looking at apartments near the downtown area." "So you'll be out by then?" The question had an edge that made Maxwell glance up from his plate. "That's the plan," I assured her. "I appreciate everything you both have done, truly." Maxwell raised his glass. "To new beginnings." Heather clinked her glass half-heartedly. "And to getting our guest room back." The final week at their house grew increasingly tense. Heather seemed to find fault with everything I did, from how I packed my belongings to my schedule for apartment hunting. "You're leaving these boxes in the hallway?" she'd ask, though they were neatly stacked against the wall for less than an hour while I cleaned the guest room. "That's a safety hazard, Bryce." 3 days before my planned departure, I returned from an apartment viewing to find Heather waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed and expression stormy. "Care to explain this?" She thrust her phone toward me, displaying a credit card statement. "A $200 charge at Northwest Electronics. I don't recall making that purchase." Confused, I looked more closely at the date. "That was last Thursday afternoon. I was at a job interview then. You can check my calendar." "Well, nobody else has access to my card," she insisted, voice rising. "And magically, there's a charge for electronics while my tech-obsessed brother is living here." The accusation stunned me. "Heather, I would never take your credit card. That's not just crossing a line, it's illegal." Maxwell entered the kitchen, drawn by our raised voices. "What's going on?" Heather explained her suspicion while I stood there, feeling ambushed and violated by the accusation. When she finished, Maxwell frowned. "Honey, we were at lunch together last Thursday," he said quietly. "Remember? You bought that wireless speaker for your office. At Northwest Electronics." Heather's face flushed, but rather than apologize, she snatched her phone back. "Well, I forgot. There's been so much to keep track of lately with an extra person in the house. She stormed out, leaving an uncomfortable silence behind. Maxwell sighed. She's been under pressure at work, he offered weakly. The Sanderson wedding has been a nightmare to coordinate. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without saying something I'd regret. That night, I accelerated my packing, determined to leave as soon as possible. On moving day, Maxwell helped carry boxes to my car while Heather remained conspicuously busy with work calls. When everything was loaded, Maxwell gave me an awkward hug. Take care of yourself, Bryce. And don't be a stranger. Heather eventually emerged from her home office for a perfunctory goodbye. Good luck with everything, she said, giving me a brief, stiff hug. I'm sure Mom and Dad will be glad to have you back in Portland. As I drove away, relief washed over me like a physical sensation. The constant tension of the past 3 months began to dissipate, replaced by optimism about my fresh start. Little did I know that Heather's campaign against me was just beginning. The first sign that something was amiss came during my weekly call with Mom. Usually warm and inquisitive, she seemed distracted and brief. When I mentioned visiting the following weekend, she hesitated. Oh, this weekend isn't good, she said quickly. Your father and I have plans with the Johnsons. Maybe another time? I brushed it off initially, but when the pattern repeated for 3 consecutive weekends, concern grew. Dad, normally talkative about his woodworking projects and neighborhood news, became similarly evasive on calls. Their excuses varied but shared a common thread: they didn't want to see me. During one call, Mom mentioned something that caught my attention. Heather tells us you're settling in well, she said. She mentioned your new apartment is quite luxurious for someone just starting a new job. My 1-bedroom apartment was modest at best, located in an older building with outdated appliances and carpeting that had seen better days. When I described my actual living situation, Mom seemed confused. That's not what Heather said. She mentioned hardwood floors and granite countertops. Said you showed her pictures? I hadn't shown Heather any pictures, nor had she visited. The fabrication was bizarre and seemingly pointless, yet it confirmed my suspicion. Heather was actively misrepresenting me to our parents. Other comments followed. Dad mentioned being glad I'd cooled down since moving out, though I'd never lost my temper at Heather's house. Mom referred to me, finally taking responsibility, as if I'd been irresponsible previously. Each conversation contained subtle references to events or behaviors that never occurred, all apparently sourced from Heather. When I tried addressing these discrepancies directly, their responses were noncommittal. Families see things differently sometimes. Mom would say vaguely, let's focus on the present. The distance grew. Sunday dinners, once a standing invitation when I lived in Portland before, were never reinstated. My parents began declining my invitations to meet for lunch or coffee. When we did speak by phone, conversations were superficial and brief. After 6 weeks of this treatment, I called Heather directly, determined to understand what was happening. I don't know what you're talking about, she replied when I asked what she'd been telling our parents. Maybe they're just busy. Not everything revolves around you, Bryce. They're repeating specific things, Heather. Things you supposedly told them about me. Like what? Her tone was defensive. Like my luxury apartment with hardwood floors and granite countertops. You know that's not true. You've never even seen my place. A long pause followed. Look, I might have assumed based on the rent you mentioned. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal if you're systematically turning our parents against me. She laughed, though it sounded forced. That's ridiculous. And honestly, pretty paranoid. Maybe this is why Mom and Dad are keeping their distance. The conversation ended without resolution, leaving me frustrated and increasingly isolated from my family. As weeks passed, the emotional toll mounted. I'd returned to Portland partly to be closer to family, yet found myself more alone than when I lived 6 hours away. At work, I maintained a professional facade, but colleagues noticed my subdued demeanor. Everything okay at home? My team lead Cassandra asked after I declined another invitation to after-work drinks. I nodded and smiled, unwilling to unpack my family drama in the workplace. The approaching milestone of Mom's 60th birthday in October added another layer of stress. Normally, such an occasion would involve a family celebration, but no plans had been shared with me. When I called Dad to ask about it, he was evasive. "We're keeping it small this year," he said. "Elaine doesn't want a fuss." This contradicted everything I knew about my mother, who had always loved birthdays and celebrations. The realization that I was being deliberately excluded from this significant family event crystallized my fears. Whatever Heather had been saying had fundamentally changed how my parents viewed me. As October approached, I faced a decision: accept my exclusion or take direct action to reconnect with my family and confront whatever misconceptions had taken root. Little did I know that my choice would lead to the most painful rejection of my life. Mom's birthday fell on a Saturday in mid-October, when Portland's trees displayed their most vibrant autumn colors. After weeks of internal debate, I decided to surprise her with an unannounced visit. Perhaps face-to-face, away from Heather's influence, we could reconnect and begin repairing whatever damage had been done. I requested Friday off work, telling my manager Cassandra I needed a long weekend for family matters. She agreed readily, even adding, "I hope everything works out, Bryce." Her genuine concern made me realize how little I'd shared about my personal struggles with colleagues. Thursday evening, I carefully selected a gift, a vintage turquoise bracelet from Mom's favorite artisan jewelry shop, along with a handwritten card expressing my love and appreciation. I also baked her favorite lemon blueberry cake from scratch, a recipe she taught me years ago. These personal touches, I hoped, would remind her of our connection. Friday morning, I loaded my car and began the hour-long drive from my Portland apartment to my parents' suburban home. The familiar route brought back memories of countless visits before the rift, when arriving at their house meant warmth and belonging. The autumn scenery along the highway offered a peaceful backdrop as I rehearsed what I might say. "I miss you both," I practiced aloud. "Whatever you've heard, I'd like a chance to talk directly." Then, more vulnerably, "I don't understand what's happened between us, but I want to fix it." My stomach knotted with anxiety as I turned onto their street. Their modest two-story house looked exactly as it always had: Dad's meticulously maintained lawn, Mom's flower beds prepared for winter, the American flag by the door that Dad replaced every Veterans Day. The familiarity made the emotional distance even more surreal. I parked across the street, noticing several other cars in the driveway and along the curb. Clearly, some celebration was underway despite Dad's claim about keeping it small. I spotted Heather's red SUV immediately, confirming my exclusion was deliberate. Taking a deep breath, I retrieved the gift bag and cake box from my passenger seat. The short walk to their front door felt like crossing an invisible boundary. Would they welcome me once they saw me in person? Or had Heather's narrative completely overwritten 27 years of being their son? I rang the doorbell, hearing muffled conversation and laughter inside. Footsteps approached, and the door swung open to reveal Dad, his expression transitioning from polite host smile to shock when he registered my presence. "Bryce?" He stood frozen in the doorway, blocking my view inside. "Happy birthday to Mom," I said, attempting brightness despite his reaction. "I thought I'd surprise her." Before Dad could respond, Mom appeared behind him, curious about the extended doorway conversation. Her face fell when she saw me, a reaction that felt like a physical blow. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice strained. I held up the cake box and gift bag. "It's your birthday. I wanted to celebrate with you." Dad's posture stiffened as he exchanged a look with Mom. "This isn't a good time, son. It's just a quick visit," I pressed, increasingly desperate as the rejection became clear. "I made your favorite cake, the lemon blueberry one you taught me." Mom's expression hardened in a way I'd never seen directed at me before. "Bryce, we know what kind of person you've become. Heather has told us everything. What are you talking about?" Confusion and hurt collided as I struggled to understand. Dad stepped slightly forward, his voice lowered. The stealing from them. The verbal abuse toward Heather. Breaking their things when you got angry. Threatening Maxwell when he tried to intervene. We never raised you to behave that way. Each accusation landed like a physical blow. None of it had happened. Not a single word was true. Dad, that's not. I never did any of those things. Heather's lying to you. Mom's eyes flashed with anger. So now you're calling your sister a liar? She took you in when you needed help, and this is how you talk about her? Because she us lying. I insisted, my voice cracking with emotion. Ask Maxwell? He was there every day. We have asked him. Dad replied firmly. He confirmed everything. This new information staggered me. Maxwell had witnessed the reality of my stay. Why would he corroborate Heather's lies? Can I please just come in so we can talk about this? I pleaded, seeing curious faces peering from the living room behind them. Mom shook her head. Not today. This is supposed to be a happy occasion. And I'm not part of that. The question emerged broken and vulnerable. Not until you get help and take responsibility for your actions, Dad said. We raised you better than this, Bryce. At that moment, Heather appeared behind them, her expression a complex mixture of surprise and something else, satisfaction. She placed a protective hand on Mom's shoulder. Is everything okay out here? She asked, though her eyes conveyed a clear message to me. You don't belong here. It's fine, Mom replied, leaning slightly into Heather's touch. Bryce was just leaving. The finality of those words shattered something fundamental inside me. My own mother, on her birthday, was rejecting me based on lies. And my father, always my advocate growing up, stood firmly beside her in this rejection. Fighting back tears, I carefully placed the cake box and gift bag on the doorstep. Happy birthday, Mom! I managed, my voice barely stable. I hope you have a wonderful day. I turned and walked back to my car with as much dignity as I could muster, feeling their eyes on my back. As I pulled away from the curb, I glanced in my rearview mirror to see Dad picking up my offerings from the doorstep before closing the door firmly. The drive back to my apartment passed in a fog of shock and grief. Traffic lights, other cars, the autumn scenery, all blurred together as my mind replayed the doorstep rejection on loop. The most painful aspect wasn't just being turned away, but realizing my parents truly believed I was capable of the awful behavior Heather had described. Somehow I made it home, parked, and reached my apartment door before completely breaking down. Collapsing onto my couch, I finally released the sobs that had been building since leaving my parents' house. 27 years of love and trust, destroyed by calculated lies. The foundation I'd built my life upon had crumbled completely, leaving me adrift in a reality I never could have imagined. My phone buzzed with a text. Perhaps Mom or Dad had reconsidered? Instead, it was from Heather. You shouldn't have come today. Give them space. They'll reach out when they're ready. The audacity of her message, positioning herself as the reasonable mediator rather than the architect of this estrangement, ignited a flare of anger through my grief. I turned off my phone, unable to bear any further contact with the family who had so thoroughly rejected me. As evening fell, I sat in my darkened apartment, the weight of complete isolation pressing down like a physical force. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my place in the world, had been upended in a single afternoon. Tomorrow would require figuring out how to move forward, but tonight, I allowed myself to fully experience the loss of what I'd always taken for granted, the unconditional love of family. The hours following my parents' rejection passed in a haze of disbelief. I drove aimlessly through Portland's rainy streets, windshield wipers keeping rhythm with my racing thoughts. Unable to face my empty apartment, I pulled into a highway rest stop and sat watching raindrops trace patterns down my windows, each one carrying a fragment of the afternoon's devastation. Around midnight, with hands shaking, I called the one person I knew would answer regardless of the hour. Natalie, my friend since college, picked up on the second ring. Bryce? Is everything okay? Her voice, sleepy but immediately concerned, broke through my numbness. They wouldn't let me in. I managed, the words sounding strange even to my own ears. My own parents. Natalie listened as I poured out the entire story. Heather's lies, my parents' cold rejection, the birthday gifts left abandoned on the doorstep. When I finished, the silence stretched for several seconds. "Where are you right now?" she finally asked. "Some rest stop off Highway 26. You shouldn't be alone. My couch is yours for as long as you need it." That night on Natalie's couch marked the beginning of what I would later recognize as my emotional rock bottom. Morning brought no relief, just the crushing realization that yesterday's nightmare was my new reality. I called in sick to work, unable to imagine maintaining professional composure. "Take whatever time you need," Cassandra said when I reached her Monday morning. "Family emergencies come first." The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. The following days blurred together. I returned to my apartment but struggled with basic functions. Showering felt like an insurmountable task. Preparing food became an exercise in robotic movements without pleasure or purpose. Sleep arrived in fitful bursts, interrupted by dreams of standing at that closed door, my parents' faces contorted with disappointment. On Natalie's insistence, I blocked my family's numbers after Heather sent several more texts that alternated between faux concern. "We're worried about your mental state," and subtle threats. "Mom and Dad might involve authorities if your behavior escalates." Each message twisted the knife deeper, reinforcing the terrible power of her lies. 2 weeks after the birthday incident, I sat across from Margot, a therapist Natalie had practically dragged me to see. Her office, with its soft lighting and absence of clinical sterility, should have been comforting. Instead, I felt exposed as she waited patiently for me to begin. "I don't know where to start," I admitted. "Most people don't," she replied simply. "Why don't you tell me what brought you here today?" The story spilled out for the second time, marginally easier to articulate but no less painful. Margot listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making notes. When I finished, she set her notepad aside. "What you're experiencing is a form of traumatic grief," she explained. "You've lost your family, not through death, but through a betrayal that's fundamentally altered your relationship. That's a profound loss, and your emotional response is completely appropriate." Her validation cracked something open inside me. "I keep wondering what I did to make Heather hate me enough to do this." "That's a natural response, looking for ways you might have contributed to the situation. But sometimes, Bryce, we aren't responsible for others' actions toward us. From what you've shared, your sister's behavior suggests deeper issues that likely have little to do with anything you actually did." Those early sessions with Margot became lifelines as November turned to December, and the prospect of holiday celebrations loomed like a threatening storm. Thanksgiving had been spent with Natalie and her roommates, kind people who included me warmly but couldn't replace the family traditions I'd lost. As Christmas approached, the cheerful decorations around Portland felt like deliberate reminders of my exclusion from family gatherings. Work provided some structure, but my performance suffered noticeably. Projects that once would have engaged my full attention now required extreme effort to complete. In early December, Cassandra called me into her office, and I braced for the performance review I knew was coming. "You're one of our strongest developers, Bryce," she began. "But something's clearly going on. Your code reviews have missed obvious errors, and you've been withdrawn in team meetings." I nodded, unable to deny the assessment. "Is there anything we can do to support you through whatever you're dealing with?" The unexpected compassion in her question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on what I'd lost that I'd failed to recognize the support system still available to me. I gave her an abbreviated version of my situation, emphasizing my commitment to improving my work performance. Cassandra surprised me by sharing her own experience with family estrangement. "It took me 3 years to speak to my father after a similar situation," she confided. "Just know that your value as a person isn't diminished by their inability to see the truth." That conversation marked a subtle turning point. While the pain remained acute, I began noticing the chosen family forming around me. Trevor, A fellow developer who'd recently transferred to our team started inviting me to weekly basketball games. Though initially reluctant, I found the physical exertion and camaraderie surprisingly therapeutic. Family drama is universal, Trevor remarked one evening as we grabbed post-game burgers. My sister didn't speak to me for 2 years after a disagreement about our grandfather's estate. Eventually, the truth surfaced. Hang in there. Christmas arrived with its inevitable emotional minefield. I declined Natalie's invitation to join her family celebration, knowing I wasn't ready for the well-meaning questions from strangers about my own family. Instead, I volunteered at a community dinner for unhoused residents, finding unexpected solace in serving others who were also separated from traditional family structures. January brought a new year and Margot's suggestion that I begin journaling as an emotional outlet. Initially skeptical, I found myself filling pages with memories, questions, and eventually, analysis of family dynamics I'd never previously examined. I think Heather resented me from adolescence, I wrote one evening. But why? Mom and Dad never favored me in any way I could recognize. Did she create a narrative in her mind that justified her resentment? Or was there something real I missed entirely? These written explorations helped externalize the circular thoughts that had plagued me since October. Through them, I began reconstructing my self-image, which had been shattered by my parents' willingness to believe I was capable of theft, destruction, and threats. By spring, I had established new routines and relationships that sustained me. Weekend hikes with Trevor and his girlfriend Olivia. Monthly dinner parties at Natalie's apartment. Regular sessions with Margot, gradually decreasing in frequency as I developed stronger coping mechanisms. My work performance recovered as I channeled energy into professional growth, earning a positive 6-month review and small raise. The pain of family estrangement never fully disappeared, but its acute edge dulled to a manageable ache. I stopped checking social media for glimpses of family gatherings I'd been excluded from. Holidays became occasions to create new traditions rather than mourn lost ones. When my lease expired in May, I moved to a brighter apartment in a different neighborhood, symbolically distancing myself from the person who had waited desperately for family reconciliation. Summer arrived with its long, sunny days and outdoor social events. I joined a community garden, finding unexpected peace in nurturing plants and chatting with elderly neighbors who shared gardening wisdom. On difficult days, I returned to Margot's central message. Your worth isn't determined by others' inability to see it clearly. As the 1-year mark of my job anniversary approached, I felt tentatively established in my reconfigured life. The persistent question of why Maxwell would corroborate Heather's lies occasionally surfaced, but I'd learned to acknowledge it without letting it dominate my thoughts. Some questions Margot had helped me accept might never have satisfying answers. Then, 18 months after that devastating birthday rejection, an unexpected email arrived that would once again reshape my understanding of family, truth, and the possibility of healing even the deepest wounds. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in April, its ordinary subject line, "Need to talk to you," belying its extraordinary content. The sender's name, Maxwell Anderson, sent a jolt through me as I stared at my office computer screen. After a moment's hesitation, I clicked to open it. Bryce, I know it's been a long time, and you probably never want to hear from anyone connected to your family again. I wouldn't blame you. But there are things you need to know, and I can no longer keep silent about what happened. Heather and I are divorcing. This isn't about getting sympathy or trying to drag you into our problems. It's about the truth. The lies Heather told your parents about you were completely fabricated. All of them. You never stole anything, broke anything intentionally, verbally abused anyone, or threatened me. You were a respectful houseguest who was trying to get back on his feet during a difficult time. I corroborated her lies because she threatened to destroy my professional reputation and relationship with my own family if I didn't. It was cowardly, and I've lived with the guilt of what my silence did to you every day since. There's no excuse that could possibly justify what I did, but you deserve to know why it happened. Heather has harbored resentment toward you since childhood. She believes your parents always favored you, gave you more attention and praise. Whether that's true isn't for me to say, but it became her justification for systematically turning them against you when you lived with us. The monster narrative she created was deliberate and calculated. I've attached screenshots of text conversations where she admitted what she did. I've also spoken with your parents and told them everything. They're devastated, Bryce. They feel betrayed by Heather and ashamed of how they treated you. They want to reach out but are afraid you'll want nothing to do with them. I understand if you never want to speak to me again. What I did was unforgivable. But please consider reconnecting with Richard and Elaine. They were victims of manipulation too. If you're willing to talk, my number is still the same. Maxwell. I read the email 3 times, emotions cycling between vindication, renewed anger, and a complex grief for what had been needlessly destroyed. The attached screenshots showed text exchanges between Maxwell and Heather from various dates, including one from just after my birthday visit. Maxwell. I can't believe we let that happen. He was devastated. Heather. He'll get over it. I had to make sure Mom and Dad saw who he really is. Maxwell. But none of what you told them was true. He never did any of those things. Heather. It doesn't matter. They needed to take my side for once. Another exchange from 2 months later. Maxwell. Your parents asked again about the incident with the broken television. I don't think I can keep lying about this. Heather. You'd better figure it out. Remember what happens if you contradict me. Maxwell. This isn't right. Bryce didn't deserve any of this. Heather. Everyone thinks he's so perfect. He needed to experience what it feels like when people don't worship the ground you walk on. My hands shook as I closed the screenshots. The naked malice in Heather's words confirmed what I'd suspected but couldn't prove. Her actions weren't about anything I'd done, but about a narrative she'd constructed about our entire relationship. I forwarded the email to my personal account and left work early, needing space to process this seismic revelation. At home, I paced my apartment, alternating between reading the messages again and sitting in stunned silence. After an hour, I called Margot and secured an emergency session for that evening. This changes everything and nothing, Margot observed after I shared Maxwell's email. The truth is finally acknowledged, which validates what you've known all along. But the harm that was done remains real. What do I do now? I asked, the question encompassing more complexity than its simple wording suggested. What do you want to do? I considered this carefully. Part of me wants to forward these screenshots to everyone we know, to make sure they all see what she did. Another part wants to pretend I never received this email and continue the life I've built without them. Both are understandable reactions. What about your parents? Maxwell mentioned they want to reconnect. The question struck at the heart of my conflict. Did I want my parents back in my life? Could I trust them again after they'd so readily believed the worst about me? I don't know, I admitted. They chose to believe awful things about me without even giving me a chance to defend myself. They were manipulated by someone they trusted, Margot pointed out. That doesn't erase the hurt they caused you, but context matters when you're deciding how to move forward. I nodded, acknowledging the complexity. I need time to think about this. That night, I drafted and deleted multiple responses to Maxwell before finally sending a brief acknowledgement. Thank you for finally telling the truth. I need time to process this information before deciding how to proceed. Please don't share my contact information with anyone else in the family yet. His reply came within minutes. I understand completely. Take all the time you need. And Bryce, I'm truly sorry. The following days passed in a blur as I attempted to integrate this new information into my understanding of the past 18 months. I shared Maxwell's email with Natalie and Trevor, whose supportive outrage provided a welcome external validation of my feelings. What a twisted thing to do to your own brother, Natalie fumed during our lunch meeting. And Maxwell is nearly as bad for going along with it. Family dynamics can be incredibly complex, Trevor noted. But this crosses every line of decency. A week after Maxwell's revelation, I received a handwritten letter from my parents. The familiar sight of Mom's neat penmanship on the envelope caused an unexpected surge of emotion. "Dearest Bryce," the letter began. "There are no words adequate to express our profound regret and shame for how we treated you. Maxwell has revealed the full extent of Heather's deception, and we are devastated by our failure to see through it. We believe terrible lies about our own son, a son who has never given us any reason to doubt his character. The memory of turning you away on my birthday haunts me daily. The hurt in your eyes as you placed your gifts on our doorstep is an image I cannot erase. We don't expect or deserve forgiveness, but we want you to know that we now understand the truth. If there is any possibility that you might consider allowing us back into your life, even in the smallest way, please let us know. We miss you terribly and love you with all our hearts. With deepest remorse and endless love, Mom and Dad." The letter unleashed tears I thought I'd exhausted months ago. The pain felt fresh again, but now mingled with a new possibility: reconciliation. Not an easy forgiveness that erased the harm done, but perhaps a careful rebuilding on more honest foundations. After another session with Margot discussing healthy boundaries and reasonable expectations, I composed a response to my parents. I acknowledged their apology, expressed my continued hurt, and suggested we proceed cautiously with regular video calls before attempting in-person meetings. I also requested that any reconciliation process include family therapy. "I want to rebuild our relationship," I wrote, "but it needs to be based on truth and mutual respect. I need to know that you will never again believe the worst about me without giving me a chance to speak for myself." Their response was immediate and enthusiastic, agreeing to all my conditions. Our first video call was scheduled for the following Sunday, an intensely emotional 90 minutes of tears, apologies, and the first tentative steps toward healing. Mom looked noticeably aged, with new lines around her eyes that spoke of months of distress. Dad's confident demeanor had given way to a subdued vulnerability I'd never witnessed before. "We should have trusted our own experience of who you are," Dad said, his voice breaking. 27 years of knowing your character should have outweighed anything Heather claimed. "We failed you as parents," Mom added, "and we'll spend however long it takes trying to make that right." The conversation wasn't easy, but it was necessary. We agreed to weekly video calls and monthly sessions with a family therapist who specialized in estrangement and reconciliation. Maxwell's prediction about Heather proved accurate. When confronted with the exposed truth, she refused to acknowledge wrongdoing, instead claiming she'd been protecting our parents from my true nature. This defensive response only confirmed the depth of her issues and reinforced my decision to maintain distance from her as I cautiously reopened communication with Mom and Dad. 2 months after that first video call, we agreed to meet in person at a neutral location, a restaurant halfway between our homes, with our therapist Dr. Lauren present. The sight of my parents waiting nervously at the table, Mom clutching Dad's hand for support, stirred complicated emotions. The meal was awkward at times but ultimately productive, establishing a framework for our ongoing reconciliation. As summer transitioned to fall, a final piece of the puzzle fell into place. At Dr. Lauren's suggestion, we arranged a facilitated conversation with Heather. I was reluctant but recognized the importance of addressing the source of the family fracture directly. The meeting took place in Dr. Lauren's office, with my parents present. Heather arrived looking defensive and immediately launched into justifications for her actions. "You've always been the golden child," she began, her voice tight with resentment. "Perfect Bryce who could do no wrong. You have no idea what it's like living in that shadow. So you decided to destroy my relationship with our parents?" I asked, maintaining the calm composure Dr. Lauren had helped me practice. "I didn't destroy anything. I just wanted them to see you clearly for once." "By inventing lies about things that never happened?" Mom interjected, surprising me with her directness. "Heather, we loved you both equally. If you felt otherwise, that's something we need to address, but it never justified what you did to your brother." Heather's facade cracked slightly. "You never saw it. The way you'd light up when Bryce got another academic award or job promotion. The pride in your voice when you talked about him to your friends. We were equally proud of your accomplishments. Dad insisted. Your artistic talents, your success in event planning. It never felt that way to me, Heather said, her voice smaller now. Dr. Lauren guided the conversation toward Heather's perceptions versus the reality of our family dynamics. While no magical resolution occurred, the meeting accomplished what I'd hoped, a direct acknowledgement of the deliberate harm done and the beginning of Heather's accountability process. As we left the session, Heather approached me privately. I still think they favored you, she said, but what I did was wrong. I'm starting therapy next week. Not just for this, but for everything. It wasn't a full apology, but it was a start, an acknowledgement that her actions required examination and change. Whether our sibling relationship could ever be repaired remained uncertain, but the truth had finally emerged from the shadow of lies, allowing all of us to begin healing in our own ways. Following the confrontation with Heather, I experienced a tumultuous mix of emotions, vindication coupled with lingering anger, relief intertwined with caution. Maxwell's revelations had validated my version of events, but the damage done couldn't be erased by simply knowing the truth. Trust, once shattered, couldn't be instantly restored through apologies alone. I scheduled an additional session with Margot to process my conflicted feelings about moving forward with my family. I'm struggling with how to feel, I admitted as we sat in her now familiar office. Part of me wants to embrace my parents' attempts to reconcile, but another part remains deeply hurt that they so readily believe the worst about me. Margot nodded thoughtfully. Both reactions are valid. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the hurt never happened or that trust can be immediately restored. It's about deciding whether the relationship is worth rebuilding, with new boundaries and expectations. And what about Heather? I asked. She acknowledged her actions were wrong, but she still justifies the motivation behind them. Your sister's journey toward accountability is separate from your decision about reconnecting with your parents, Margot observed. You can choose different paths for different relationships based on what feels healthy for you. This framework helped me navigate the complex reconciliation process that unfolded over the following months. I composed a measured email response to Maxwell, acknowledging his courage in finally telling the truth while making it clear I wasn't ready for direct contact with him. While I appreciate your honesty, the fact remains that you witnessed my sister's fabrications and chose to support them, I wrote. Your silence enabled significant trauma that could have been prevented. I hope your decision to finally speak the truth brings you peace, but I need to prioritize my own healing at this time. His reply was simple. I understand completely. Thank you for responding at all. With my parents, I proceeded more cautiously. Our weekly video calls continued, gradually increasing in length and depth as we rebuilt our connection. These conversations weren't always comfortable. I had questions that needed answering. Why didn't you ever ask for my side of the story? I asked during one particularly emotional call. 27 years of knowing me, and you accepted Heather's version without question. Mom wiped tears as she responded. There's no excuse, Bryce. We failed you completely. Heather presented things so convincingly, with Maxwell backing her claims. She showed us a broken photo frame, claiming you'd thrown it during an argument. She had details that seemed impossible to invent. She played on our deepest fears as parents, Dad added, his voice unsteady. The fear that we didn't really know our adult children, that something could have changed in you that we missed. It wasn't rational, and we should have trusted our history with you. Their candor, while painful to hear, helped me understand the complex manipulation they'd experienced. Heather hadn't simply made accusations, she'd created an elaborate narrative supported by physical evidence and Maxwell's corroboration. Understanding the mechanics of the deception didn't erase the hurt, but it provided context that helped me process my feelings. After 3 months of video calls, we scheduled our first extended in-person meeting, dinner at a neutral restaurant location with Dr. Lauren present. I arrived early, watching through the window as my parents approached the entrance. Mom smoothed her hair nervously, Dad adjusted his collar repeatedly. Their anxiety was palpable, and oddly comforting, evidence that they understood the gravity of rebuilding our relationship. The initial moments were awkward, hesitant smiles, uncertain whether to hug or shake hands. Dr. Lauren skillfully guided our conversation through prepared topics, helping us navigate emotional landmines while encouraging authentic communication. By dessert, some of the tension had dissipated, replaced by cautious optimism. "We've missed so much of your life this past year and a half," Mom said, her eyes filling with tears. "Your new apartment, your work accomplishments. All the everyday moments we used to share. I've missed you too," I admitted, surprising myself with the simple truth of it. Despite the pain they'd caused, they remained my parents, and the love hadn't disappeared, it had just been buried under layers of hurt and betrayal. As our careful reconnection progressed, the question of Heather's place in our family dynamic remained complicated. She had begun individual therapy, according to our parents, and had acknowledged her actions were wrong. However, her continued insistence that her motivations were justified by perceived childhood favoritism created a significant barrier to reconciliation. 5 months after Maxwell's revelatory email, Heather requested a private meeting with me. After consulting with Margot, I agreed to meet at a coffee shop near my office, a public location where I could easily leave if needed. Heather arrived looking different than I remembered, less polished, more subdued. The confident sister who had orchestrated my family exile seemed diminished somehow. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, fidgeting with her coffee cup. "My therapist thinks it's important that I speak to you directly about what happened." I nodded but remained silent, allowing her the space to continue. "I've been diagnosed with a personality disorder," she said after a moment. "It doesn't excuse what I did to you, but it helps explain some of my thought patterns. I genuinely believed Mom and Dad loved you more, and that narrative became so real to me that I felt justified in my actions. You deliberately destroyed my relationship with our parents," I replied evenly. "That goes beyond feeling unloved or overlooked." She nodded, eyes downcast. "I know. My therapist is helping me understand the difference between my perceptions and reality. I've spent my whole life constructing narratives about how people view me, often negative ones that aren't based in fact." While her acknowledgement represented progress, I remained cautious. "I appreciate you telling me this, Heather, but rebuilding trust will take time, if it's possible at all." "I understand," she said quietly. "I'm not asking for forgiveness right now. Just the opportunity to demonstrate change through actions, not just words." We parted with no promises beyond our agreement to continue open communication about her therapy progress. While skeptical, I recognized that her willingness to acknowledge her diagnosis and seek treatment represented a significant shift from her previous defensiveness. The most challenging aspect of the reconciliation process came when my parents suggested hosting a small family dinner at their home, the same location where they had rejected me on the doorstep 18 months earlier. The symbolic weight of returning to that threshold wasn't lost on any of us. "We understand if you're not ready," Mom said during our weekly call. "We just thought it might be healing to create a new memory there." After discussing it with Margot, I agreed, with one condition. I'd like Dr. Lauren to join us for at least part of the evening. The dinner was scheduled for a Sunday in October, almost exactly 2 years after the birthday rejection. As I drove the familiar route to their suburban home, memories of that painful day surfaced vividly. I practiced the grounding techniques Margot had taught me, focusing on the present moment rather than past trauma. Mom opened the door before I could ring the bell, her eyes already glistening with tears. "Welcome home," she whispered, extending her arms uncertainly. The hug we shared was tentative but genuine, a physical acknowledgement of both the distance we'd traveled and the journey still ahead. Dad stood in the hallway, visibly emotional. "Son," he said simply, voice breaking as he embraced me. Dr. Lauren observed quietly from the living room, providing the secure presence we'd all come to rely on during difficult moments. The evening wasn't perfect. Conversations sometimes stalled, painful topics emerged and required careful navigation. But there was also laughter, genuine moments of connection that reminded me of the family we'd been before Heather's destructive campaign. As the night concluded, Dad walked me to my car. "I know we can never fully make up for what happened," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "But I want you to know that we're committed to rebuilding our relationship on your terms, whatever that looks like." I nodded, touched by his sincerity. "I'm willing to keep trying," I replied. "That's all any of us can do." Driving home that night, I reflected on the long, painful journey from rejection to reconciliation. The relationship with my parents would never be the same as before. The innocent trust of childhood had been irreparably altered. But perhaps the new relationship we were building, founded on honest communication and respect for boundaries, could ultimately be stronger than what we'd lost. Heather remained a complicated figure in our family narrative. Her acknowledgement of wrongdoing and commitment to therapy represented progress, but complete reconciliation seemed distant at best. Maxwell, having fulfilled his role in revealing the truth, had moved to another state after the divorce, maintaining minimal contact with all of us. As autumn leaves fell around Portland, mirroring the season of my original exile from the family, I found myself experiencing not just healing but growth. The painful journey had forced me to examine family dynamics I'd previously accepted without question, to build a support network outside traditional family structures, and to develop a stronger sense of self-worth independent of others' perceptions. The process of forgiveness, not as a single moment of absolution but as an ongoing choice to move forward despite the harm done, had begun. Not for my parents' benefit, or even for family harmony, but for my own peace and well-being. The path ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time in 2 years, it held the possibility of genuine connection rather than just survival. It's been exactly 1 year since that first tentative dinner at my parents' house, marking 3 years since the doorstep rejection that shattered our family. As I reflect on this journey, I'm struck by how dramatically life can change, both in its unraveling and in its careful reconstruction. My relationship with Mom and Dad has stabilized into a new normal. We see each other twice monthly for Sunday dinners, alternating between their house and my apartment. These gatherings lack the unreflective ease of our pre-estrangement relationship but have gained something valuable in its place: authentic communication and clearly established boundaries. "I'm so proud of how you've handled yourself through all of this," Mom said during our most recent dinner, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "You've shown more maturity than either of us." Dad nodded and agreed. "You've taught us about resilience, son, and about forgiveness that doesn't compromise self-respect." Their acknowledgement of my growth through this painful process feels validating, though I'm careful not to define my recovery through their recognition. One of the most valuable lessons from this ordeal has been learning to anchor my self-worth internally rather than seeking external validation, even from those closest to me. Heather remains a complex presence in our family landscape. Her individual therapy has continued steadily, supplemented by monthly sessions with a psychiatrist who manages medication for her diagnosed borderline personality disorder. While she hasn't fully accepted responsibility for the calculated nature of her campaign against me, she has acknowledged the severity of the harm caused and expressed what appears to be genuine remorse. Our interactions remain limited and structured: occasional text messages, brief appearances at family gatherings before or after my visits, and quarterly mediated conversations with Dr. Lauren. Progress is measured in small moments. Heather recently returned a childhood book of mine she'd kept for years, accompanied by a note recognizing its sentimental value to me. These gestures, while modest, suggest a developing capacity for empathy that her therapist confirms represents significant growth. "Recovery isn't linear," Dr. Lauren reminded us during our most recent family session. "The goal isn't perfect relationships but healthy ones with appropriate boundaries." Maxwell and I have had minimal contact since his revelatory email. He sent a card on my birthday with a brief, respectful note acknowledging the anniversary of our reconnection process. I responded with a polite thank you, maintaining the emotional distance that feels right for now. His new life in Colorado represents a clean break from the dynamics that facilitated such damage, and I respect his decision to step back completely. The support network that sustained me during my darkest period has evolved into an essential part of my life regardless of family reconciliation. Natalie remains my closest friend, the person who witnessed my complete breakdown, and still treats me with normalcy rather than fragility. Trevor and Olivia have become weekend hiking companions and fellow enthusiasts in Portland's culinary scene. These chosen relationships provide a different kind of security than family ties, connections based on mutual choice rather than obligation. Professionally, I've found my footing again. The struggles at work during my emotional nadir have been replaced by renewed focus and creativity. 6 months ago, I was promoted to senior developer, with Cassandra specifically citing my resilience and emotional intelligence as assets to the team. The acknowledgement felt particularly meaningful coming from someone who had witnessed my struggle without fully knowing its cause. Margot and I concluded our regular therapy sessions 3 months ago, transitioning to monthly check-ins. During our final weekly appointment, she asked a question that continues to guide my reflection. What would you say are the most significant ways this experience has changed you? The answer remains multifaceted. I'm more cautious now, less willing to assume good intentions without evidence. Yet paradoxically, I'm also more compassionate, having experienced firsthand how family systems can distort perceptions and enable harmful behaviors. I'm more attuned to subtle manipulation in all relationships, quicker to establish boundaries when something feels wrong. Most importantly, I've developed a deeper understanding of forgiveness, not as forgetting or excusing harm, but as releasing the expectation that the past could have been different. My parents couldn't undo their rejection at the doorstep, but they could commit to building something new from the broken pieces. Recognizing this distinction has been crucial to moving forward without diminishing the reality of what happened. The lingering effects of trauma sometimes surface unexpectedly. I still experience a flutter of anxiety when my phone displays my parents' number, a momentary flash of the rejection that once shattered my world. Certain phrases or situations can trigger vivid memories of that rainy drive home from their house, the birthday cake sitting untouched beside me. Dr. Lauren assures me these responses are normal, and will likely diminish further with time. What sustains me through these moments is the knowledge that I survived the worst-case scenario, complete family rejection, and built a meaningful life despite it. There's a peculiar strength in having faced your deepest fear and emerged on the other side, changed but intact. That resilience remains mine regardless of how family relationships evolve in the future. As for the broader lessons about family dynamics, I've come to view family relationships as gardens rather than buildings. They require ongoing tending, regular assessment of what's growing well and what isn't, and sometimes difficult pruning of unhealthy patterns. The work is never truly finished, and neglect can quickly undo progress. This perspective has helped me approach reconciliation as a process rather than a destination. I'm particularly grateful for the chosen family who surrounded me when biological connections failed. Their consistent support demonstrated that meaningful bonds can form outside traditional family structures, a reality that provided essential comfort during my isolation and continues to enrich my life now. Balancing these relationships with reconstructed family ties represents an ongoing navigation rather than a problem to solve. As I look toward the future, I remain cautiously optimistic about continued healing. Mom and Dad have maintained their commitment to honest communication and respect for boundaries. Heather's therapy provides hope for healthier family dynamics, even if complete reconciliation remains uncertain. My own growth continues through mindfulness practices, creative pursuits, and deepening connections with trusted friends. The story of our family's fracture and partial healing isn't one with a neat conclusion. Rather, it's an ongoing narrative of human complexity, of how deeply we can hurt those we love, how resilient the human spirit can be in the face of rejection, and how truth, however delayed, creates possibility where none existed before. What I know with certainty is this: family bonds, while powerful, aren't immune to the consequences of betrayal. Reconciliation requires more than apologies. It demands consistent action, authentic accountability, and mutual respect for established boundaries. And sometimes, the family we rebuild after devastation, while forever marked by what was broken, can ultimately be stronger at the mended places. Have you ever experienced family betrayal or estrangement? How did you navigate the complex emotions that came with it? I'd love to hear your stories of resilience and healing in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more reflections on family dynamics, healing from betrayal, and building meaningful connections. And if you know someone struggling with family estrangement, consider sharing this video. Sometimes knowing others have walked a similar path can provide comfort during the darkest moments. Thank you for witnessing my journey, and remember that even the deepest wounds can eventually become the foundation for profound growth and wisdom.